Alright, in this video we're going to talk about the properties of real numbers, and when we talk about properties of numbers we're talking about the types of operations that are legal, if you will, with numbers. So let's go ahead and take a look at the list of the properties that we're going to talk about and examples of each. Alright, the first property we're going to talk about is called the commutative property, and you can think of the commutative property as a change in the order. So for example, the commutative property of addition, for example, would be something like this. A plus B would be the same thing as B plus A. In other words, it doesn't matter how we add two numbers together, we're going to get the same sum. As an example, if we take 3 plus 5, that would be the same thing as taking 5 plus 3. Both sides here are equal to 8, so this is a legal move if you want to change the order of numbers when you add them. The same thing applies with multiplication. A times B is the same thing as taking B times A. Let's go ahead and look at a negative number here. Negative 4 times 5 would be the same thing as 5 times negative 4. Notice the order of the numbers have changed. We have negative 4 first on the left side and 5 first on the right hand side. Negative 4 times 5 is negative 20, and 5 times negative 4 is also negative 20. So, again, the commutative property is a change in the order, whether it's the order of the terms or the order of the factors, as we saw in the multiplication. Now, when you think of the associative property, what you need to think of is a change in the grouping. For the addition, that would be like this. We take A plus B plus C. Notice we group the B and the C on the left side. That would be the same thing as A plus B plus C, but grouping the A and the B on the right-hand side. As an example of that, let's just do easy numbers here. 3 plus 4 plus 5. Let's group it around the 4 and the 5. That would be the same thing as 3 plus 4 plus 5, like this. We'll show that by simplifying within the parentheses first on the left-hand side. So 4 plus 5 is 9, then 3 plus 9 is 12. That's the same thing on the right side as taking 7 plus 5. Again, we did the parentheses first, which is also equal to 12. So by regrouping the numbers, we get the same result. And that is true with addition. So there is an associative property of addition, and there's also an associative property of multiplication. So let's go ahead and look at that rule. It's essentially the same thing. We're going to take A times B times C. Let's go ahead and group the A and the B this time first. That would be the same thing as A times B times C, like this. Now we could put the dots between them if you want, but AB means A times B. So as an example, we can take 4 times 5. Sorry about that. Let's go ahead and take that times what, let's say 6. Would be the same thing as 4 times 5 times 6. So again, within the parentheses first gives us 30. 4 times 30 is 120. On the right side, we have 4 times 5, which is 20, times the 6 is also 120. So once again, if you have a product of three numbers and you want to regroup them, you're allowed to do that. The next property is called the distributive property, and it looks like this. If we have some number A, in parentheses we have B plus C, we can distribute the outside factor to each term inside the parentheses. So A times B is AB, and distribute that to the C. The A to the C becomes plus A times C. Alright, it also works with subtraction. I can have A in parentheses B minus C. That's the same thing as A times B. Bring over the subtraction this time, and then that's A times C. So let's go ahead and look at an example here. Again, we'll just use nice pretty numbers here. 2 plus, let's say, 7. If we distribute the 5 to the 2, like this, 5 times 2, plus distribute the 5 to the 7, these two sides should be equal. So if we simplify in the parentheses, we have 2 plus 7, which is 9. Then 5 times 9 is 45. On the right-hand side, we do have to do the multiplication first. 5 times 2 is 10. 5 times 7 is 35. When we add these two numbers together, that gives us 45. So notice both sides are equal. So this property works. You're allowed to distribute across addition. What about subtraction? We'll go ahead and use the same numbers that we have on the other side. That should be equal to 5 times 2 minus 5 times 7. Let's see if that works. Inside the parentheses, if we do the subtraction, 2 minus 7 is negative 5. Then 5 times negative 5 is negative 25. On the right-hand side, again, multiplication first, we have 10 from 2, or 5 times 2 is 10. Then 5 times 7 is 35. Doing the subtraction, 10 minus 35 is negative 25. So we see that we are allowed to distribute across subtraction. All right, some of these next few properties that we're going to be looking at might seem kind of silly that why do we even use them, but they're going to come up later on. So let's go ahead and take a look at this one, the addition property of 0. If we have any number a plus 0, that would be the same thing as taking 0 plus a. Now, no matter if you take 0 and add it to a, or add a to 0, you're still going to get the same number. Seems kind of silly maybe, but it does. It is a property and it works. It's called the addition property of 0. So for example, if I take 5 plus 0, that's equal to 5. That would be the left-hand side. And 0 plus 5 is also 5. What about the multiplication property of 0? You might guess this. If you multiply anything by 0, what do you get? And the answer is 0. So a times 0 would be the same thing as 0 times a. No matter how you multiply, you still get back not the a, but you get back 0. 0 times a is also 0. So as an example, negative 3 times 0 would be equal to 0, and 0 times negative 3 is also 0. What about for the multiplication property of 1? Well, if you multiply anything by 1, what happens? You get the same thing back. So a times 1 would be equal to, we'll just write it like this, a times 1 is still a, and 1 times a is also equal to a. So as an example, let's take 4 times 1 is equal to 4, and 1 times 4 is also equal to 4. The next property we're looking at is called the inverse property of addition. Essentially, that is just adding the opposite. So for example, if I take a plus the opposite of a, anything plus its opposite gives us 0. And the same thing applies if I take negative a plus its opposite, which is positive a, we also get 0. So if I take, for example, 7 plus what's the opposite of 7 is negative 7, we get 0. And same thing if I take negative 7 plus positive 7, which is the opposite of negative 7, obviously, we get 0. Finally, we have this inverse property of multiplication. The inverse property of multiplication says this: if we take a times the inverse just means flip it over. So a is assumed to be a over 1, so the inverse is 1 over a. When you multiply these two together, it gives you 1. Same thing applies if we take 1 over a. If I flip 1 over a over, that's going to give me a over 1, or just a, and that's also equal to 1. So as an example, if we take, let's go ahead and take 9. What's the reciprocal of 9? Is 1 over 9. We learned this in one of the properties with multiplication. We're allowed to cross cancel. 9 goes into 9 once. It goes into the other 9 once. So you can see that it gives us 1. Now another way to see that would be that 9 times 1 over 9 is the same thing as 9 over 9, which is also equal to 1. And it should be obvious then if I take, let's go ahead and do 1 over 9 this time. What's the reciprocal? If I flip this over, what's the reciprocal of 1 over 9? That's 9, or 9 over 1. Same thing applies here. You either get 9 over 9 or cancel the 9's out. Regardless, it gives you 1 as a result. So once again, these are just properties of real numbers, which are legal operations that allow you to manipulate numbers that might help you in performing calculations on numbers. So anyway, I hope that helps you understand them.